Okay, so Agile, um, it's everywhere, It feels like you can't escape it these days, but what does it actually mean? We're going to do a deep dive into that today with this article from World Consulting Group, and they really break it down.
Yeah, they really do. And I think a lot of people are kind of intimidated by Agile.
Yeah,
Like what does it really even mean? The big takeaway here is that it's really about working smarter, not harder.
I definitely like the sound of that. So the article jumps right into this whole Scrum versus Kanban thing. So it's
hmm
like choosing how you want to manage your projects.
Exactly. And they lay out the differences really, really well. So
Mhm.
imagine you're building a car, right? Scrum is like having that detailed blueprint and a super strict schedule.
Hmm.
And those daily check-ins are like inspecting each part as it's being built, making sure everything fits perfectly.
Okay, so there's a lot of structure with Scrum. So where does Kanban fit into this car analogy?
So Kanban is more like if you've got this high-performance assembly line.
Right.
You're still building a car, but you're just really focused on optimizing the flow of work. So if one part of the process is slowing things down, you adapt. You
Yeah,
shift resources around to keep things moving.
that makes a lot of sense. So Scrum, you've got a plan, you stick to it. Kanban, you're more flexible, you adapt as you go. What are these user stories, though? I keep seeing that term pop up.
User stories, these are so important. It's like trying to explain to someone what a car feels like if they've never actually driven one before.
Yeah.
User stories give everyone on the team that experience.
I see what you mean. So instead of getting bogged down in all the technical stuff, you're focusing on the person who's actually going to be using the thing.
Exactly. You're building something that people actually want and need. And the article has this great example about a software development team. They were working on a new feature,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of just saying implement feature X, they wrote a user story that said, as a user, I want to be able to easily find the information I need so I can quickly complete my task.
Oh, wow. That changes how you think about it completely. It's way more user
Mm.
focused. So how does this all work in practice, though? They mention agile metrics, and honestly, that sounds kind of intimidating.
They do sound a little intimidating, but I promise they're not as bad as they seem.
Mm.
Just think of it like the gauges on your car's dashboard.
Yeah.
You've got things like throughput, which tells you how much work you're actually completing, like your speedometer.
Okay, so if my throughput's high, that means things are moving, we're getting work done. What about velocity?
So velocity measures how much work your team can actually handle, like in a sprint. Like your car's fuel efficiency helps you plan realistically.
So you don't run out of steam halfway through a project?
Yeah.
Okay, what about lead time? That one sounds a little trickier.
Yeah, lead time's all about speed. It measures how long it takes for a task to go from to-do to done. So it tells you how responsive your team is. A short lead time means you can adapt to changes really quickly, like having good acceleration in your car.
Makes sense. So it's not just about tracking how many hours you're working, it's about understanding the bigger picture of how work actually gets done.
Exactly. And a big part of that is identifying any bottlenecks or roadblocks. Speaking of which, the article talks a lot about the importance of feedback loops, especially through something called sprint reviews.
Sprint reviews, what are those all about?
Imagine you're taking that car we've been talking about for a test drive with all the people who helped design and build it. That's kind of what happens in a sprint review. The team shows off what they've accomplished and gets feedback from everyone involved.
So you can make sure the project stays on track and everyone's happy with the direction.
Exactly. It's all about transparency and collaboration,
Yeah.
making sure that the final product is something that everyone's proud of. And this feedback loop, it's so essential for keeping the project aligned with its goals.
This is fascinating. I never thought about it this way, but you could apply Agile to so many things, not just software development.
Oh, absolutely. And the article actually mentions how some marketing teams are using agile principles to stay ahead of the curve.
Really? So how would that even work? Would you be using data to constantly adapt and change marketing campaigns?
Exactly. It's about being flexible and responsive to change. Agile gives you a framework for doing that.
This is really eye-opening. And we've covered so much already, and I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
Barely. But we've laid a good foundation for understanding what Agile is all about.
For sure. It's so much more than just a buzzword. It's a whole different way of thinking about work. But before we go too far, there's this other thing I wanted to ask about. The article mentions that Agile is about more than just the tools and processes. It's about creating a certain kind of work environment. What did they mean by that?
So they're talking about the human element of Agile. It's not enough to just say, okay, we're doing Agile now. You need a culture where Agile can actually thrive.
So almost like a cultural shift, not just a project management thing.
Exactly. And as you can imagine, anytime you're talking about changing a company's culture, there are going to be challenges.
Especially with bigger companies, right?
Definitely. And that's why the article talks about how crucial it is to have strong leadership to make that happen.
Because if the people at the top aren't on board, it's never going to work.
Exactly. Leaders need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Otherwise, it's just another flavor of the month corporate initiative.
Exactly. They need to embody that agile mindset, prioritizing collaboration, open communication, and continuous improvement. And it'll trickle down throughout the whole organization.
That makes a lot of sense. Agile's not just a set of rules, it's a philosophy about empowering your team to do their best work.
You got it. And speaking of empowering teams, the article also talks about choosing the right tools to support your Agile journey.
Okay, so we're not just talking about whiteboards and sticky notes here, are we?
Well, those can be helpful too, but we're also talking about all the digital tools out there for Agile project management.
Now, those sound kind of intimidating. What are we talking about here?
Think of them like digital command centers for your Agile projects. They've got Kanban boards, Gantt charts, sprint planning tools, all in one place.
So everything you need to manage an Agile project all together. That sounds efficient.
That's the idea. It helps streamline communication, makes collaboration easier, and gives you a really clear overview of how the project is going.
But with so many different tools available, how do you even begin to choose?
That's a great question. And the article actually gives some good tips. It emphasizes choosing tools that actually align with your needs and how your team already works.
So no one right answer?
Not necessarily. You might need different tools if you're doing Scrum versus Kanban. It's all about finding what works best for you.
This is really helpful information. I feel like I'm starting to get a real sense of how to navigate the world of Agile.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the article emphasizes that it's not just about using the tools, it's about using them strategically to improve how you do Agile.
So it always comes back to people, collaboration, and making sure you're creating something valuable.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the heart of Agile.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far. We've gone over so much, from Scrum and Kanban to user stories, feedback loops, and now even the right tools. We haven't even finished the article yet, but I feel like I'm starting to really understand Agile.
Same here. And this is only the beginning.
Yeah,
There's always more to learn about Agile.
absolutely. But before we move on, I want to hear more about this Agile transformation thing. They touched on it in the article, and it sounds like a pretty big deal, especially for bigger organizations.
It really is. It's not a simple process. The article makes it clear that Agile transformation isn't something that happens overnight. It's about completely changing how an organization thinks and operates from the ground up.
So you're really talking about a huge cultural shift.
Yeah, and that can be tough, especially for large companies that have been around for a while. You know, the article talks about how it's like turning a giant ship. It doesn't happen quickly.
Yeah, it's not like slapping on a fresh coat of paint and calling it a day. So what needs to happen to make this kind of transformation work?
Well, the article really emphasizes the importance of leadership. You need someone at the top who gets it.
Yeah.
You know, who can articulate that vision of what a more agile organization looks like.
And get everyone else on board with it.
Exactly. Because if people don't understand why things are changing, they're going to resist it, right?
That makes sense. So it's not just about telling people to do Agile. It's about showing them why it matters.
Right. It's about getting everyone on the same page and making sure they understand how it benefits not just the company, but also them as individuals.
So it's about collaboration and communication.
Exactly. And, you know, the article also brings up this other interesting point, which is that there's no single right way to do Agile.
Really? I thought it was more of a set system.
Yeah. Not necessarily. It's more like a framework, you know? And the article talks about how different companies need to adapt it to their own specific needs.
So what works for one company might not work for another.
That's right. It's about finding what works best for your team, your company culture, your goals.
This is so interesting because it really challenges the idea that Agile is just this rigid set of rules.
Exactly. It's much more fluid and adaptable than that. And that's what makes it so powerful.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. I feel like I had this very narrow view of Agile before, but now I'm starting to see how much potential it really has.
That's great to hear. It's all about changing your perspective.
And being open to new ways of working.
Exactly. And, you know, the best part is that Agile is a journey. It's not about reaching some kind of end goal. It's about constantly improving and evolving.
So there's always something new to learn.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so exciting.
So where do we go from here? We've talked about all these different aspects of Agile, but How do we actually start putting it into practice? What are the first steps?
Well, the article actually offers some really practical advice on that.
Yeah.
It talks about starting small, experimenting, and not being afraid to fail.
Because failure is just another opportunity to learn.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. It's all part of the process.
So it's about embracing that iterative approach.
Absolutely. And being open to feedback.
So those feedback loops we talked about earlier, those are crucial.
They're essential. It's how you learn and grow and make sure you're on the right track.
So it's not enough to just implement Agile. You have to constantly be evaluating and adjusting your approach.
Exactly. It's about being flexible and adaptable. Remember, Agile is all about responding to change.
This is making me think about all the different ways I could be more agile in my own work and even in my personal life.
That's the beauty of it. It's not just for businesses. It's a mindset, a way of approaching challenges and finding solutions.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far. I'm really starting to understand the power of Agile and how it can transform the way we work and live.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And, we haven't even touched on everything. There's so much more to explore.
Which is exciting. It means there's always something new to learn.
Exactly. And that's what makes this such a fascinating field.
This article has given us so much to think about. But before we wrap things up, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this idea of agile leadership. It's something that's been mentioned a few times, and I think it's really important.
It is important because ultimately the success of any Agile transformation comes down to leadership. But it's not just about having Agile in your job title. It's about embodying those Agile values and principles in everything you do.
So leading by example.
Precisely. It's about creating a culture of trust and transparency, where people feel empowered to take risks and innovate.
Because without that, agile just becomes another buzzword.
Exactly. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
I love that. And, it makes me think about those leaders who have really embraced agile and made it a core part of their organizational culture. What sets them apart? What are they doing differently?
That's a great question. And it's something the article touches on as well. It talks about how these leaders are often very good communicators. They're able to clearly articulate the vision and the benefits of Agile in a way that resonates with people.
So they're storytellers in a way.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. They're able to paint a picture of what a more agile organization could look like and get people excited about the possibilities.
And that's so important because change can be scary, especially in a work environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People need to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves and that their contributions matter.
And that's what good leadership does. It brings
Yeah.
people together and inspires them to achieve common goals.
Exactly. And when you have that kind of leadership, Agile can truly flourish.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of Agile now and how it can be applied in so many different contexts.
I'm glad to hear that. Remember, Agile is a journey, not a destination. Keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep those feedback loops open.
Great advice. And on that note, we'll wrap up this part of our deep dive into the world of Agile. We'll be back soon to explore even more about this fascinating and ever-evolving methodology. It really is a whole different way of thinking, isn't it? So how do companies even begin to make that shift? Where do they start?
Well, the article stresses the importance of having a clear vision for what that Agile future looks like. What do they want to achieve? What kind of culture are they trying to create?
Right, because without that clear destination in mind, it's easy to get lost along the way.
Exactly. It's like trying to navigate a maze without a map.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where strong leadership becomes absolutely crucial.
Because someone needs to be that guide, right? To keep everyone moving in the right direction.
Precisely. They need to be the champions of Agile, the ones who are constantly communicating the vision, the benefits, and the progress being made.
Because change is hard. It's natural for people to resist it, especially in a work environment.
Absolutely. People need to understand why they're being asked to change how it will benefit them and how it will ultimately lead to a better outcome for everyone.
It's about bringing everyone along on the journey.
Exactly. It's a collective effort.
So we've talked about the importance of leadership, but what about the practical side of things? How do you actually implement Agile in a way that works?
Well, the article really emphasizes the need for a structured approach. You can't just flip a switch and expect everything to magically become agile.
Right, it's a process.
Exactly. It's about taking a step-by-step approach, starting with small, manageable changes, and gradually building on those successes.
So start small, experiment, and learn as you go.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to fail along the way, because failure is just an opportunity to learn and improve.
That's such an important point. Agile is all about embracing that iterative process, isn't it?
Exactly. It's about constantly evaluating, adjusting, and improving. And it's about being open to feedback throughout the entire process.
Those feedback loops are crucial.
They are. That's how you ensure that you're on the right track and that you're creating something that truly meets the needs of your users or your customers.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I've gone from being intimidated by the word agile to actually understanding its power and potential.
I'm so glad to hear that. And, we've only just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to learn and explore within the Agile universe.
There is, but for our listeners who are just starting their own agile journeys, what would you say is the most important thing to remember?
I think the most important thing is to just start. Don't get bogged down in trying to do everything perfectly right out of the gate.
It's about taking that first step.
Exactly. Agile is all about being adaptable and iterative. So start small, experiment, learn from your mistakes, and never be afraid to ask for help.
That's fantastic advice. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of Agile. We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we did.
We did. And remember, the journey to becoming more agile is ongoing. So keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep those feedback loops open.
And keep listening to the deep dive for more explorations into the world of business, technology, and beyond. We'll see you next time.